Chapter 2161. Young Master Song Feng was slightly taken aback, then he laughed and said, "You two must be joking. That little girl is so skilled that she can come and go as she pleases in our building. How could I, a lowly person, possibly stop her?" Hu Shechen looked at them with a grin. Where did she go? In the next second, that smiling expression disappeared and was replaced by an indifferent one. "If you don't speak honestly, I'll tear down your building in a bit." "Wah, I don't, sir." Emolien. He had a headache as he looked at these coy male escorts and reached out to press his aching head. His wifey running to this kind of place in the middle of the night was truly rebelling. "Young master, our spring full house is a legitimate business," the man in red shouted indignantly. "How can you be so unreasonable?" Young Master Song Feng blocked the red, orange, yellow, green, blue, and purple people who were filled with righteous indignation. He glanced indifferently at Emolien and Hu Shechen and cupped his hands. "Masters, please don't play with this small shop anymore. That little girl just now followed someone to the rear courtyard. How about we go over and take a look now?" "Lead the way," Emolien growled impatiently. General Jia, whose face was flushed from drinking, suddenly interrupted angrily and asked, "Who is that little stoic to you? And who are you?" A severe glint flitted through Emolien's eyes. When everyone saw that General Jia wanted to recklessly reason with someone, they promptly reached out to stop him. General, calm down, General. Who are you?" Hu Shechen leisurely swept that general a glance and raised the corners of her eyes. Unexpectedly, it was as if General Jia was possessed. When he saw Hu Shechen's handsome face with a faint smile, he actually became absent-minded and wanted to pounce on her with a drooling face. "Beauty, this general is Shuntian Prefecture's Tiger Pendant Battalion's general." Slap. A heavy slap landed on General Jia's originally somewhat swollen old face. Everyone truly felt sorry for the general. Hu Shechen's slap from a distance wasn't light at all. 2 teeth were swept out, and General Jia was so shocked that he screamed. That General Jia still wanted to say something, but unexpectedly another slap came on his right cheek. Pa! The slap landed heavily, knocking out 2 of his right big teeth. Now, both sides of his face were symmetrical and swollen, squeezing his eyes into slits. Being beaten to the point of looking for teeth all over the floor, this was probably the kind of situation that the female orioles and swallows felt their hearts skip a beat and silently shut their mouths. "How terrifying! Hurry up and lead the way." Emolien glanced coldly at young Master Song Feng, feeling very unhappy. Without another word, young Master Song Feng turned around and walked towards the backyard. Everyone followed and went downstairs. When they arrived at the back garden, they saw a figure standing behind the rockery from afar. When the crowd walked over, they saw the young lady with her back facing them. She shouted angrily, "Yi Lingmin, why aren't you coming out? Why did you lead me here?" Emolien was about to quickly walk over when she suddenly saw the young lady pinch out a talisman seal. She suddenly raised her arms, and dozens of tracking talismans and revealing talismans scattered from her hands. Bang! When everyone heard the sound, they abruptly turned their heads and saw a figure appear beside the flower path. She was wearing Cyan men's clothing, but the hat on her head was knocked to the ground, revealing a head of fine black hair. Sure enough, it was a woman. Did the little stoic miss barge into the house of spring for this woman? Young Master Song Feng was startled and raised his head to look ahead. Chapter 2162. The clear and cold moonlight shone on the green ripples at the edge of the pool. The little stoic turned around. On her snow-white face, her eyes were like 2 cold stars as she stared straight at the woman who was sitting paralyzed on the ground. Her eyes didn't conceal the icy glint that resembled an icy bolt of lightning. "I let you off last time, yet you still dare to appear in front of me," the little stoic coldly said. "Yi Lingmin, today, I'll get rid of you, this calamity, on behalf of my sect." Auber suddenly paused, and his gaze followed the faintly flowing moonlight and landed on Emolien. "Husband?" The little fellow finally saw her dark-faced husband and floated to the man's side in a flash. She looked up at him and asked, why did you come? Haha. Ma Shurchen helplessly face-bombed and chuckled. Instead of sleeping in the middle of the night, you came to this red light district. It'd be strange if Emolien could sit still. When he mentioned this, the little stoic was immediately displeased. Husband, where did you run off to in the middle of the night? Emolien couldn't help but laugh in exasperation. This little fellow even learned to complain first when the guilty party was the victim. Tong came to find me to discuss something. Emolien reached out to pinch her small face with a grin. This isn't the main point. The main point is that when I returned to my room to take a look, my wifey actually disappeared. Aber felt a bit guilty and hastily turned his head to look at Yi Lingmin, who was still unable to move after being struck down by talisman energy. It's her. She threw a small stone at the window. She brought me here. Husband, this restaurant is really strange, the little stoic said softly, her fingers sliding over the back of the man's hand. You have to be careful. Restaurant? Everyone. Yi Lingmin clenched her teeth and suddenly moved. However, she didn't run away. Instead, she pounced at General Jia like a gust of wind. Jia Wu, accept your death. General Jia narrowed his old eyes as he stared at the pouncing Yi Lingmin and couldn't help but fly into a rage. Who are you? Without another word, Yi Lingmin stabbed her sword thrice. However, after being hit by the tracking talisman, she was forced to reveal herself. At this moment, she was still somewhat exhausted and weak, so the spiritual energy she sent out seemed to be somewhat weak. General Jia's skills were about the same as hers. Although he didn't have much ability to retaliate in front of the little stoic and Emolien, he could still deal with Yi Lingmin, an elementary rank spiritual cultivator. She kicked Yi Lingmin in the stomach, causing her to take a few steps back. Yi Lingmin turned to look at Aber. Junior sister, take him down first. I'll let you punish him as you wish. Who is he? Aber asked with a frown. On the surface, he is the general of Shuntian Prefecture's Pang Tiger Camp, but according to my investigation, this person is the deputy commander of Gung Pengcheng's private army, the Shuntian Guard. So that was the case. Yi Lingmin had probably lured her here to capture this Vice Commander Jia. Aber released Emolien's hand and jumped in front of General Jia. General Jia was completely jolted awake by Yi Lingmin's fright. When he heard Yi Lingmin expose his identity, he was infuriated, but he was completely unable to stop her from continuing. After glancing at the little stoic, he abruptly turned around and wanted to escape. What kind of joke was this? This stoic face still had two formidable helpers. If he didn't leave now, when would he? Unfortunately, he had just turned around when his left leg was grabbed by a vine. He looked down and saw a green vine coiled around his left leg. Someone exerted force, and he was abruptly pulled to the ground. With a bang, he smashed into the ground like a dog eating shit. Chapter 2163. At this time, General Jia was probably cursing in his heart. A belly full of anger rushed out from the depths of his heart, and Jia Zhong angrily berated, "You people, let go of this general. You dare to attack the general of Tiger Pang Camp? Aren't you afraid of incurring the anger of the entire Shuntian Prefecture?" Aber sneered and thought, even your Shuntian Prefecture's prefecture master, Gung Pengcheng, has already vanished into thin air. What does a small general of Tiger Pang Camp count for? Let go of me. Aber took out an ice sword glittering with cold light and pointed it at Tiger Pang Camp's general, Jia Zhong, who was lying on the ground. If you talk nonsense again, I'll cut off your head and feed it to the dogs. Cut it off, cut it off. Little junior sister, he's provoking you. Aber naturally knew that Jia Zhong was provoking her to kill him, so she expressionlessly glanced at the man on the ground. Aber's fingers moved slightly, and a pearl-sized white jade ball was flicked into Jia Zhong's mouth with a whoosh. Don't worry, you won't die for the time being. Withdrawing her ice sword, Aber turned and returned to Emolien's side. Go back. Wait. Young Master Song Feng hurriedly stood out from the crowd and said with a frown, Little girl, General Jia is also a guest of our spring house. You can't take him away like this. Arbor glanced at him and suddenly turned her head, facing him with the back of her head. Hu Shurchen couldn't help but want to laugh. Every time the little guy was stubborn, he liked to face others with the back of his head. Mo Lien reached out to hold Arbor's little hand and looked down at her with a smile. Okay. Miss Chow inexplicably felt that Prince Mo's gaze was a bit scary. So strange, why did she feel a chill on the back of her neck? Was it her illusion? The Crown Prince clearly smiled so gently and looked like a gentle spring breeze, but she felt a bit gloomy. Illusion. She must be overthinking it. Out of the instinct of a small animal, the little girl, who sensed a bit of danger, suddenly raised her head and smiled sweetly at Prince Mo. Husband, I want a hug. Hu Shurchen was speechless. The little girl was too cunning. Who could resist her? When this stoic little face suddenly changed into a smile, it was truly so sweet that it made one's heart follow along and form the 3 rivers of spring water, sparkling under the sunlight. One wished for nothing more than to hold the sun, moon, and universe in their hands, just to make her smile. Sure enough, Mo Lien was a bit dumbstruck as he watched. He subconsciously nodded his head and naturally picked up the little fellow. Ah! Jia Wu suddenly let out an extremely tragic cry. Everyone turned their heads to look, only to see that Jia Wu's entire arm seemed to have rotted. The flesh peeling off inch by inch caused everyone to involuntarily feel a chill in their hearts. Yi Lingmin was also shocked and couldn't help but move to the side to avoid being stained by Jia Wu's disgusting flesh. Arbor flicked his finger, and a bit of rune light flew into Jia Wu's glabella. Suddenly, Jia Wu's figure moved and he gave up struggling. He stood up woodenly and expressionlessly followed Prince Mo as he walked over mechanically. General Jia? Young Master Song Feng was startled. He carefully looked at Jia Wu's face and saw that his entire face was old-fashioned and serious, without the slightest expression. It was as if he was instantly controlled by someone. Could it be a puppet rune? A bad premonition slid through young Master Song Feng's heart. Chapter 2164. If it was a puppet curse, depending on the level of the talisman, it could cause the victim to lose their self-awareness for 70 to 60 days, and the victim would have to obey orders obediently. Of course, it wasn't impossible if there was another talisman practitioner with more profound talisman power to help the victim undo the curse. It was just that. The puppet curse that the stoic-faced little girl threw out seemed to be very impressive. Why did the little girl have a curse on her? Young Master Song Feng couldn't help but be a bit puzzled. Song Feng, are we going to let them go just like that? The gorgeous man in red looked at young Master Song Feng in astonishment. Young Master Song Feng glanced at him. What else? Are you going to rush up and stall them? Then I'll send people to the prefecture head to ask for reinforcements? The gorgeous man in red chuckled. Then forget it. What a joke. If he really dared to rush up, wouldn't he be torn into pieces by that fierce little stoic? Yi Lingmin followed them silently all the way to the inn's entrance. Only then did Arbor turn to look at her and ask coldly, "Still not leaving? I have a few words to say to you." Mo Lien and Hu Shurchen turned to glance at Arbor and nodded. "Let's go up first." They entered the side room. After being tormented for most of the night, the sky was already a bit bright. Arbor looked at her indifferently. "What is it?" "At that time, I was in a hurry to go to Shuntian Prefecture, so I found a secret medicine and took it. Although my cultivation improved by leaps and bounds in a short time, my cultivation will gradually dissipate. However, with the passage of time, my cultivation will slowly disperse, and it will disperse faster and faster with each passing year," Yi Lingmin said softly. "That's what you deserve. Don't expect me to save you," Arbor said bluntly. "Yes, I never expected little junior sister to save me." Yi Lingmin nodded and said, "I deserve it, but I'm telling little junior sister this because I want to tell you that I might not have much time left. So I want to tell you in advance about the things I've investigated over the years." Arbor was silent for a long time. He looked at her coldly and said, "Speak." "I have followed this Jia Wu for a long time. After many investigations, I found out that he is the deputy commander of Gung Pengcheng's private army. Yi Lingmin glanced at General Jia, who was standing silently at the side. Gung Pengcheng usually keeps a very low profile. It's very difficult to investigate him. If this Jia Wu didn't like men, I'm afraid we wouldn't have caught him so easily. Yi Lingmin continued, according to my investigation, I suspect that Gung Pengcheng's private army is probably hiding under the red light district. I followed Jia Wu several times, but in the blink of an eye, I lost him. If I were to say that the entrance is not underground, I cannot imagine how that Jia Wu would be able to disappear before my eyes. Aba's expression eased a little. He stretched out his hand and waved at the frozen Jia Wu. Come here. Upon hearing this, Jia Zhong walked up like a marionette before stopping in front of Qiao Mu and the others, standing there in a daze. Gung Pengcheng secretly cultivated a private army? Yes, Shantian guards. How is their strength? 100,000 mystic cultivators. 5,000 spiritual cultivators below level 10. 500 spiritual cultivators above level 10. Yi Lingmin's expression changed. This number was already very large to her. It seemed that removing this faction would not be something that could be done overnight. Aba asked expressionlessly, where is the base? Chapter 2165. Where's the base? Aba asked again expressionlessly. A hint of pain and struggle appeared on Jia Wu's face. Perhaps he was like this out of his instinctive resistance when the core question was asked. Aba threw another dictum talisman at him. Under the urging of the puppet talisman and dictum talisman, Jia Wu finally calmed down and said, It's 5 li outside the apricot blossom pavilion, under the bridge. After saying that, Jia Wu was like a puppet and did not make another sound. There was a spot on his arm that was so rotten that the bone could almost be seen, so subconsciously, he was in great pain and kept furrowing his brows. Since that's the case, little junior sister, let's not delay this matter. We've already alerted the enemy today. Emolien said calmly, do you think those people will still be waiting for you to go back and capture them? Aba nodded in agreement with Emolien's words. Most likely, the moment they came out of Spring House, the underground base on the other end had already started moving people. Moreover, the underground base outside the Apricot Blossom Pavilion probably only had a small portion of people arranged there. To gather as many as 100,000 mystic cultivators, a small street probably couldn't hide so many people. Aba glanced at Yi Lingmin, and the latter sensibly stood up and said indifferently, I don't believe they can run far. I'll go over there and take a look. Stop. Aba swept her a cold glance. You're still as impulsive as before. You can't even handle a level 4 spiritual cultivator like Jia Wu today, let alone other people. If you rashly go over like this, you'll just be throwing away your life for nothing. Yi Lingmin clenched her fists and turned to look at her. It's my duty to investigate the whereabouts of Shantian Prefecture's main culprit. I definitely won't let them off. Aba was indifferent. What else do you want to investigate? Lu Yizhi is dead, and Gung Pengcheng also vanished into thin air. The remaining people are merely unimportant people. I won't let any of the people who deserve to die off. Gung Pengcheng is dead. The Gung Pengcheng you assassinated at the banquet that night was one of my men, Aba said coldly. Yi Lingmin's entire body trembled as if all her strength had been sucked out of her. She sat down on the stool with a thump and stared blankly ahead. I've been investigating for so many years, I've put in so much effort, but in the end... Why don't you just move your finger and be done with it? Master is right. I'm impulsive and reckless, but I'm not smart enough. I can't compare to you. Yi Lingmin lowered her head and sighed dejectedly. Aba looked at her and said coldly, Scram before I change my mind. Don't ever appear in front of me again. I want to pay my respects to Master and Martial Uncle's memorial tablets. You're not worthy, Aba said coldly, rejecting her request. Little junior sister, do you hate me? Yes. Arba clenched her fists tightly, an indescribable sorrow in her heart. Because of your competitiveness, the entire holy water sect was brutally massacred. Where were you when I was cleaning up the corpses of my fellow disciples? Where were you when I was digging graves for my senior sisters and martial uncle? Where were you when I was piling dirt for them? Where were you when I was kneeling in front of them and sobbing my heart out? Yi Lingmin, don't think that I'll forgive you just because you shed a few tears in front of me. Chapter 2166. Never in this lifetime. Arba's cold gaze landed on Yi Lingmin's face. She turned around and said angrily, "Leave. Don't ever appear in front of me again." "I'm sorry, little junior sister. I regret it too. I regret it so much." Yi Lingmin's tears fell one by one. Seeing that Arba's back was facing her and no longer speaking, Yi Lingmin hung her head and dragged her feet out of the door, looking back every step she took. "Jojo." Emolian reached out and gently pried apart her tightly clenched fingers. He turned to look at Hu Shurchen, who had a serious expression on his face. "Why are you still standing there? Get a wet cloth." Hu Shurchen rolled her eyes at him and got up reluctantly. She took out a clean handkerchief from her pocket, washed it, and brought it over. Emolian opened the little fellow's palm and wiped off a few drops of blood for her. He sighed and said, "Jojo, I wanted to teach you a lesson, but you're so cunning. How can I bear to teach you a lesson now that you're like this?" Arba sniffled and glanced at him. She said expressionlessly, "What did I do wrong?" "Huh." Hu Shurchen chuckled and said, "You didn't do anything wrong? You went to the red light district alone in the middle of the night to look for a man. Isn't that great?" "What man am I looking for?" Arba's expression said, "You're making it up, keep making it up." Red, orange, yellow, green, blue, purple, and all those dreams and worries? Aren't they all yours? Are you talking about the green peacock and the red chicken? Arba frowned. That restaurant just has more people of all shapes and sizes. The tea is average and the food isn't that good either. Restaurant. Hu Shurchen and Emolian looked at each other. Emolian held back her laughter and asked, "What green peacock and red chicken? What did you see? It's so colorful. Green peacock, red chicken, yellow lantern grass, blue phoenix flowers. A bunch of messy colors. It hurts my eyes." The two men. "Don't you think these people are good-looking?" Yuan Shurchen's mouth twitched as she asked. Arba shook his head. "What's there to see? It was a jumble of colors. It's not even 1% as good as Duanyu." Crown Prince Mo's smiling face abruptly stiffened. Originally, he was still very pleased with himself. Sure enough, his baby automatically filtered out a group of orioles and swallows. But why the heck did Jojo always like to use Duanyu as the benchmark? For example, what does Jojo think of Yas? Jojo, I don't know him. He's not even 1/10 as good-looking as Duanyu. Duanyu, this guy, was truly a lingering spirit. So hateful. He chin blinked and suddenly laughed. "What about me? What about me? Am I better looking or is that Duanyu better looking?" Xiao Mu glanced at him before looking at her dear husband, who was sitting on the side and looking at her with a grin. A very strong desire to live inexplicably arose in her heart, and she hastily hugged Emolien's arm and exclaimed, "My Lien is the most beautiful." Pfft. Yuan Shurchen guffawed and patted the little fellow's head. Suddenly, his hand paused, and his gaze landed on her palm. "Jojo, your wound? HM?" Miss Chow looked down. Emolien's gaze also landed on her palm, which was seeping with a few drops of blood. There were now a few tiny bruises on her originally fair and tender hand. They were small wounds caused by pinching her fingertips. But they had completely disappeared by now. Her hands had returned to their original incomparably fair appearance, and not a single wound could be seen. With a small update, you're a little pleasantly surprised. *******. That's it for today. The author is dog-tired. Those with votes, please vote. Those without votes, please leave a comment. Remember to leave a 5-star review. Chapter 2167. Let me take a look. Emolien pulled her into his arms and flipped open her little paws to examine them carefully again. He nodded and said, "Your recovery ability is very strong. I can't tell that you were once injured at all." It was really quite strange. The recovery speed of this kind of injury was a little strange. Auber looked up at the two of them and said with a blank expression, "It was like this in the past." "Aya, my Chow, your little body may contain an extremely strong strange energy. It's probably the effect of the Xuanji core." To be honest, even Auber didn't quite believe this. Before she had obtained the Xuanji core, this strange recovery ability had occurred from time to time. It was just that she had neglected it most of the time. Or perhaps, she subconsciously didn't want to think about it? The Xuanji core is just a cultivation inheritance. It shouldn't have anything to do with this self-recovery ability. Emolien said with a smile, "But it's okay. This self-recovery ability is a good thing. Just don't show it in front of others in the future." Yes. It's okay if you don't know what's going on. You should know in the future if you have the chance. Chen Chen patted the little fellow's head and got up to wave his hand as he walked out of the door. "You've been tired for half the night. You're almost dog-tired. Don't wake me up when you're going to catch up on sleep. If you don't sleep well, your face will be damaged." Chen Chen leisurely walked out and said faintly. Emolien snorted and flung the door to the side room shut. He lowered his head to look at Miss Chow in his arms. Auber glanced at him and instantly pulled his hand away. She jogged to the side of the bed and rolled onto it. She pulled the blanket over her face and covered it from head to toe. "Husband, Jojo is sleepy. I'll sleep first." Emolien, looking at her two little boots that were exposed outside the blanket, Emolien couldn't help but want to laugh. This little fellow didn't have any emotional intelligence. She was used to reading people's expressions. In order to prevent him from settling the score later, she slipped away first and pretended to be asleep. She didn't even take off her shoes. Emolien walked forward and sat by the bed. He helplessly reached out to take off her shoes. "Wife." Auber saw that he had failed to pretend to be asleep, so he peeked out from under the covers and blinked at him. Emolien bent down and looked at her with a smile. "Do you still want to go to those brothels in the future?" "What brothel?" Chow Mu's eyes darted around. Emolien couldn't help but want to laugh. "Don't pretend. Pretend to be calm. I'm guessing that once you walk in, your little face will be stunned." "I don't understand what you're talking about." Auber pulled the blanket up to cover his face expressionlessly. Emolien couldn't help but want to laugh. She raised her hand to pull down her quilt and poked her cheek. "You clearly know that it's not a restaurant, it's just a small brothel. Still pretending?" Auber peeked out a pair of large eyes and looked at him carefully. She rolled over and rolled onto the bed. "Hubby, I'm going to sleep." "I don't understand what you're talking about at all." Emolien couldn't help but stare at the back of her head. He leaned over and blew into her ear as he whispered, "Wife, next time you sneak off by yourself behind hubby's back again, you'll really be out of luck." Auber only felt a chill at the back of her neck. How scary. To think that she had pretended to be cute and tried her best to squeeze out a cute smile for him to see. So he had seen through it all along. This man was too smart and sharp. She had almost fooled herself. Chapter 2168. Poor Chow. Auber was disappointed. Actually, she already knew what that red light district was the moment she walked into it. She pulled a long face just to tell everyone, "This darling doesn't know what the hell this place is. This is merely a restaurant. A strange snack bar. Nothing more." Who knew that her dear husband would see through her at a glance? Wah, poor Chow. Her husband would see through any of her little tricks. Chow at the time. Chochio, this spring full house seems to be a men's brothel. Why would Yi Lingmin come to this kind of place? I'll go in and take a look. Cho, master, I'll be killed by the great Prince Amo, wah wah wah. Chow at the time. How could that be? If you don't say it, I won't say it. Only you and I will know. Who would know? She had never visited a brothel in her previous life. Since she came here unexpectedly in this life, she might as well stroll around. Miss Chow expressionlessly walked up the steps. Aya, little miss, does your parents know that you came to our spring full house to stroll around? So long-winded. If His Excellency found out, how could she come to this men's brothel? Couldn't he tell that she was just here to stroll around? Arba reined in her thoughts and flipped over, doing her best to squeeze out a sweet smile. Hubby, don't make a fuss. Jojo is so sleepy. Emolien's smile reached the depths of his eyes. He tilted his head and looked at her with a smile. Then sleep. Remember not to think of red, orange, yellow, green, blue, and purple in your dreams, much less do on you. Think of hubby. Oh. Arba turned her head and faced him with the back of her head. She immediately closed her eyes and sank into her conscious to chat with Cho. Cho, you're capable now. You'll divulge little master's whereabouts to hubby. Wah wah wah, master, Cho is innocent. You don't know how terrifying the great Crown Prince and the venerable Peach Blossom Immortal were back then. They both threatened Cho. One wanted to roast Cho, and the other wanted to throw Cho into the frying pan. The most wicked thing was that they even wanted to throw Cho into the cesspool. Cho can't go into the cesspool. Arba. Wicked indeed. Master, Cho is in trouble. The Crown Prince had brought out his flames. How terrifying. Cho hates lightning and fire the most. Cho is too pitiful. Enough. Sell your ass in misery. Chow Mu directly blocked this little fellow. This stinking brat had purposely exposed her whereabouts. No matter how vicious those two men were, they wouldn't hurt Cho. Don't think that she didn't know. Initially, he thought that he wouldn't be able to fall asleep if he pretended to be asleep. Who knew? In less than 2 minutes, she lost all consciousness and fell into a deep slumber. By the time he woke up, the sky was already dark. Arba looked out of the window blankly and rolled out of bed. What's going on? She actually slept all the way tonight. The little fellow jumped off the bed. Just as he finished putting on his clothes, he heard the door of the room move. Emolien pushed the door open and walked in. Upon seeing her standing inside the room, Crown Prince Amo couldn't resist curling his lips in amusement. Chow woke up. Arba felt that the Crown Prince's gaze was clearly filled with mockery. Arba raised her hand to tidy up her messy long hair. Her eyes drifted as she looked around. It's already so late. I didn't think that I would sleep the entire afternoon. Ha ha. Dao Wuji's laughter came from outside the door. My sister-in-law. You didn't sleep the entire afternoon. You slept from yesterday afternoon until tonight. She could really sleep. Chapter 2169. What? Arba was stunned. She walked to the door and poked her head out to look at everyone outside. Everyone was looking at her with smiles on their faces. It's fine. You advanced for 7 days and didn't have a good rest. It's only right for you to have a good sleep. Emolien slowly walked out and reached out to hold her little hand with a smile. Arba coughed lightly and nodded. She didn't forget to roll her eyes at Dao Wuji when she walked out the door. You're the only one with a glib mouth. The group went downstairs to eat. It was a very sumptuous meal. After eating and drinking to their fill, Dao Wuji suggested that they go out for a stroll to help with digestion. Since they had nothing better to do, everyone agreed. Arba slept for a day and night and was now full of energy. She could even walk with the wind. Emolien saw that she was walking quickly and reached out to pull her to his side. He looked at her in amusement. Why are you running? I'm not running. Why aren't you running? Are you worried that your husband will settle the score with you? Arba's eyes turned and she reached out to grab his arm. Husband, Did Dun Jean send any news yesterday? Stiffly changing the topic. Emolienne poked her forehead and couldn't help but laugh. Dun Jean didn't send any news. I also find it a little strange. Wife, are you willing to accompany your husband on a night trip to Shuntian Prefecture's main residence? Arba's eyes lit up. There had been no news from Dun Jean for 2 days. It was reasonable for the two of them to sneak into the main residence and see how he was doing. Okay. Take me there, take me there. Everlasting Blade was walking in front of the two of them, so he could hear their conversation clearly. Now that he heard that they could sneak into Shuntian Prefecture's main residence to play, how could he sit still? He quickly volunteered and praised himself. Arba glanced at him and said with a serious expression, "We're not going there to play. Lien and I are going there to do serious business." Yes, 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 yes. I'm also going to do something serious. Everlasting Blade pointed at his face and said with a mischievous smile, "Look at my serious face." Xiao Mu averted her eyes in disdain. "You don't look very reliable, so I'd better not." Dao Wuji looked at Emolienne with a bitter expression. "Breaking into Shuntian Prefecture at night, Jojo and I alone will be enough." Emolienne said indifferently, "If there are too many people, it'll be easier to alert the enemy." "All right." Dao Wuji lowered his head. Arba glanced at him and snorted. "My peaches have ripened again. Do you want some?" Alas. Dao Wuji was about to sigh when the word peach popped up in his head. He suddenly sobered up and raised his head. "Yes, yes, yes. Give me a truckload." "Bah." Arba spat at him. This person was really asking for an exorbitant price. Dao Wuji looked a little aggrieved. Ever since he ate 2 peaches last time, this stingy little sister-in-law had stopped giving him any more. There were so many peach trees on Paradise Planet. The heavy peaches were about to crush the branches. What do you know? Jojo wants to use them to make spiritual peach wine. The venerable Peach Blossom Immortal rolled his eyes at Dao Wuji and waved his hand. Go to the side. Don't meddle." "Spiritual peach wine?" Dao Wuji chuckled. "In that case, Venerable Immortal must have drunk it before?" Hu Shechen snorted. "Of course. Then do you have any with you?" "No." Chapter 2170. Ji-Chen glanced at him warily. Unfortunately, his brainless answer was almost instantaneous. Instead, it made Endless Blade certain that the venerable Peach Blossom Immortal definitely had this spiritual peach wine. "Brother Chen, you're wrong. Of course, good wine should be shared with good friends." Ji-Chen glared at him with a look that said, "Who's your brother?" His expression was full of condemnation. "You're already so old, yet you still want to pretend to be young and call me brother." The Peony Fairy couldn't help but burst into laughter. Endless Blade's mouth twitched. He threw himself at Ji-Chen, wanting to hug Ji-Chen's arm. "Brother Chen, let's enjoy our blessings together. Good things should be shared. It's better to share than to share alone. Get lost." Ji-Chen kicked him without hesitation and dodged to little Taisue's side. Endless Blade thumped his chest and stamped his feet. This spiritual peach wine must be especially delicious. Otherwise, why would you be like this? For a sip of wine, he had become friendless. This wine was becoming more and more attractive to Endless Blade. Little Taisui glanced at Endless Blade in disdain. "Where's your shame?" "I don't want it any more." Everyone, why was this idiot Everlasting Blade a member of their team? Just how careless was his answer? They really felt embarrassed for Endless Blade. Xiao Mu glanced at a certain person, Dao, who was incessantly making a scene, and helplessly took out a jug of wine. However, Endless Blade had his back to her, and Ji-Chen was especially fast. In the blink of an eye, he was beside her. In the next instant, the jug in her little hand was taken away by this uncle. Ji-Chen, what are you doing? You shameless bastard! How dare you steal my wine? Is this wine really that good?" The The Peony Fairy's curiosity was piqued. Luo de sniffed hard and praised, "It's really good wine." The wine hadn't been opened yet, but they could already smell the faint fragrance of peach blossoms, accompanied by the rich fragrance of wine. Just smelling it made them feel refreshed. "It really is good wine." Thin Monk, a man of few words, couldn't help but look up at the wine jug in Ji Chen's hand. Thin Tuchuo's image was a bit strange. Half of this fellow's hair was bald, and the other half was loose like a clump of withered grass. His entire face was sallow, and he didn't like to talk much. Most of the time, he sat there silently, listening to the conversations of others. A wine that could make him open his mouth was obviously a top-notch wine. Limitless Blade wanted to take back his wine even more. He grabbed Yuan Shichen's arm and persistently shouted, "Yuan Shichen, hurry up and give me back my wine." Arber couldn't stand it anymore. "All right, everyone has one." Everlasting Blade hurriedly left Shichen behind and jogged over to Arber. He beamed with joy and said, "Jojo, let me try it first." Emolienne glanced at him and scolded him in her heart. What a glutton. Arber handed Limitless Blade a pot and distributed the rest of the wine to everyone. Finally, he glanced at Shang Chen, who was looking at him expectantly. "You brewed so many pots in the first batch." Miss Chow glared at him angrily. Most of the peach blossom wine had been stolen by this guy, Yuan Shichen. The remaining small portion had been distributed to everyone today. She only had 2 pots left. 2 pots. The winemaker had no wine to drink. How infuriating. Yuan Shichen glanced at her listlessly. "My Jojo." Chapter 2171. Arber's mouth twitched. He threw the last jug of wine to him and shouted, "Scram!" Hu Shichen giggled, took the peach blossom wine, and hurriedly moved to the side. Prince Mo's face darkened as he looked Hu Shichen up and down. This damned Hu Shichen, she had already seen through Jojo's easily softened temperament. His wife was too popular. How could he get angry? Dao Wuji had already pulled out the cork of the wine jug. After taking a sip, his eyes suddenly lit up. "Little sister-in-law, you actually hid such good wine for so long. She should have taken it out and shared it earlier." Dao Wuji beat his chest and stamped his feet. Strange, why did he feel warm all over when the wine entered his stomach, and a subtle stream of saint power slowly flowed in his body? Hu Shichen glanced at Dao Wuji with a smug look. "How is it? Do you feel it?" This spiritual wine can stimulate the flow of saint power in the body. "Are you surprised? Are you pleasantly surprised?" Seeing Hu Shichen's smug expression, everyone couldn't help but grit their teeth. No wonder this kid secretly stole most of the peach blossom wine. It turned out that it could subtly stimulate the flow of saint power in the body. If they took it in the long run, it would probably be beneficial to their cultivation level. For people like them who had already entered the spiritual venerable realm and were in the immortal venerable realm, it was as difficult as ascending to heaven to raise their cultivation level by a small level. Now that they had taken a few sips of the peach blossom wine, it was beneficial to them. How could they not be surprised? I really like this little girl more and more. She's clever and clever, oh ha 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 ha. I only hate that I wasn't born a man. Fairy Ginkgo's giggles attracted Prince Mo's cautious gaze. He suppressed it with a series of contemptuous looks. Fairy Ginkgo pursed her lips and stopped talking. As they were talking, Tong quickly came to Emolienne with several hidden guards. Bowing, Tong quickly walked forward and said to Emolienne in a low voice, "Your Highness, Madame Feng has made a move. Just now, she took dozens of people to the hillside outside the city." "How is the Shuntian Prefecture's prefecture lord?" Arber quickly asked. When Madame Feng left, this subordinate searched the entire main residence, but did not find Manor Lord Gung. Could something have happened to that chatterbox Dun Zhuang? Arber thought in astonishment. Emolienne's gaze landed on Arber. "Jojo, do you want to go over and take a look?" "All right." Arber nodded. "Since that's the case, let's go together." Fairy Ginkgo put away the smile on her face and said seriously, "Things might have changed." Little Tai Sui and the others nodded in agreement. Dun Zong is not an irresponsible person. Since he promised Jojo to stay in Shuntian Prefecture to be a good spy, it is impossible for him to disappear without any news. I'm guessing that Lady Feng must have seen through Dun Zhu's identity. Auber frowned. There's no time to lose. Let's set off immediately. Tong, lead the way. Yes. Tong immediately bowed. Turning around, he led several hidden guards and rushed out of the city. Everyone used their qi to fly. Their speed was not inferior to some ordinary flying mystic beasts. Chow Chow, you broke through to level 7 spiritual cultivator here last time. Mo Lien pointed at the mountain forest below them. At that time, it alarmed the entire Shuntian prefecture. People from all walks of life came to investigate. Auber silently pointed at the sunken ground below. What happened there? So sleepy. I woke up to catch up. Chapter 2172. Mo Lien glanced at her in amusement. Then, holding her hand, the two of them landed on the square plateau. Apart from the rather high ground they were standing on, the surrounding terrain had sunk nearly half a meter. Here, you were sitting right here at the time. Mo Lien couldn't help but comment, even hubby is scared of your advancement. The result of all the spiritual aura gushing toward you is that the surroundings can't bear the burden. Other than the square inch you're sitting on, the ground within a radius of 1,000 feet has sunk because of you. Auber expressionlessly turned her head away. Mo Lien was amused and pulled her small body back. Hubby saw it with his own eyes. Don't try to deny it. A perfectly fine mountain forest was turned into this by a little vandal like you. Little Tai Sui and the others also followed them to the sunken terrain. After studying it for a moment, they all turned to look at the expressionless Auber. Auber turned her head with a swish and asked Tong, who was standing nearby, "Have we arrived?" Reporting to the Crown Princess, Madame Nei Feng's destination is still some distance ahead. Auber waved her hand with a taut expression. Lead the way. Everyone couldn't resist snickering. The little stoic was too amusing. Every time they talked about a topic she didn't want to talk about, her small face would be especially taut. Tong hastily turned around to lead the way, leading everyone into the depths of the mountain forest. The deeper they went into the mountain forest, the more lush the trees became. Everyone gave up on flying and walked up the mountain on foot for about half an hour. From afar, they could see that the terrain had opened up slightly. After walking for another half an hour, Tong led everyone to a cliff entrance. He pointed below and said, "Madame Nei Feng led her people down from here." Everyone looked at each other in bewilderment. Auber waved the fog in front of her and said aloofly, "The fog below is poisonous." Little Tai Sui and the others hastily retreated a few steps. Auber took out several handmade antidote pills with special effects from her inner world and distributed them to everyone. "It looks like there are many poisonous insects and ants below. Be careful." Ordinary poisons were basically useless against them. Even so, Auber still reminded them to be careful and not fail miserably. "Let's go down and take a look." Auber and Mo Lien glanced at each other. Both of them raised their qi and flew down the cliff. Little Tai Sui and the others also followed behind. They controlled their speed and slowly made their way to the bottom of the cliff. He was surrounded by a thick layer of white fog, from which tiny water droplets constantly seeped out. However, since everyone had activated their defensive barriers, these small corrosive water droplets could not get close to them at all. The distance from the cliff to the bottom of the cliff was actually not too high. After everyone slowly swayed down, their eyes couldn't help but turn solemn. In front of them, there were countless palm-sized scorpions crawling back and forth. As if they had sensed the invasion of strangers, the black and red scorpions suddenly turned their heads and crawled toward their feet with rustling sounds. Auber stood in front of everyone with a calm expression. He took out a small porcelain bottle from his inner world and poured out a lot of white powder. With a few sizzling sounds, all the poisonous scorpions that stepped on the white powder turned into black pus. It was a very shocking sight. They died without a complete corpse. Seeing how powerful the poison was, everyone couldn't help but jump in fright. This is a poison powder specially used to deal with poisonous creatures. Catching up on yesterday. Chapter 2173. Waiting at ease for an exhausted enemy was effortless. Arba poured the white powder on the ground and drew a circle around everyone. The more poisonous the creature, the faster it will die after stepping on this powder. Arba looked indifferently at the pitiful poisonous creatures that turned into black puddles after stepping on that white circle and surging toward them like a tide. Arba wasn't idle either. She calmly took out several empty gourds from her inner world and collected the scorpion's poisonous blood on the ground. Everyone, they suddenly pitied these scorpions. What were they going to do? Leaving aside the fact that there were no corpses left, the little girl had to ruthlessly collect the remaining bit of blood essence. They didn't know who she would harm next time. The little girl was too savage. Arba unhurriedly collected the scorpion's poisonous blood for about half a quarter of an hour. Everyone's eyes swept around, and they couldn't help but laugh out loud. Those slow-witted poisonous scorpions finally reacted. However, at this very moment, about 2/3 of their brothers and sisters were already dead. How would the several thousand poisonous scorpions dare to approach the remaining 1/3? They cowered and crawled backward with their heads tucked in. After a series of rustling sounds, the scorpions withdrew back into the sand and disappeared without a trace. Fairy Ginkgo had long been disgusted beyond words. Rubbing the small goosebumps on her arms, Fairy Ginkgo shuddered and asked, "These disgusting things, will they emerge from the sand again?" Although she was very clear in her heart that the scorpions would not be able to cross the white line that Jojo had drawn, she still felt extremely disgusted. She covered her body with 2 layers of defensive barriers, afraid that those ugly little things would come into contact with her delicate skin. "Don't worry." Arba shook her head and said, "They've already run far away. Let's go." Emolien grasped the little fellow's small hand and pulled her forward. This valley didn't seem too big from the entrance, but the deeper they went, the deeper they felt. On both sides were cramped and towering cliffs, and a slender passageway led into the depths of the dense fog. The Ginkgo fairy and the Peony fairy quickly followed behind the little stoic. Both of them nervously wore defensive shields, and they rubbed their arms from time to time. Arba shouted, "Stop!" from time to time. Then he walked to the side of the mountain and collected some moss, vines, small flowers, and all kinds of strange things. Sometimes, when she saw a half-lying, motionless lizard, she would use her silver needles to kill it. Then, she would walk over expressionlessly, pick up the lizard, and bottle it. Everyone was speechless. Why did they feel that Chow Chow didn't seem to be taking a stroll in a dangerous poison garden? Instead, it was as if they had entered her amusement park. In her eyes, there were top-notch materials for making poison everywhere. "Stop!" Everyone's eyes twitched involuntarily. Sure enough, the little guy walked a few steps forward, squatted down, and fiddled with the soil. He pulled out a small twisting blue snake from the soil and glared at it threateningly. "Don't move." The little white snake originally coiled around her wrist also raised its round head and glared at the little blue snake to intimidate it. The little blue snake was scared silly. They didn't know if it was frightened by the little fellow or by the big boss on the little fellow's wrist. Its snake body hung down stiffly like a dead fish, stiff and motionless. Chapter 2174. Emolien and the rest looked at the snake sympathetically. The little fellow was quick to react and ruthless. She pried open the snake's mouth and gave it a warning glare. "Don't move, don't move. Everyone." In the blink of an eye, Miss Chow forcefully pulled out the 2 venomous fangs from the snake's mouth. "It hurts so much." Everyone looked at the snake's contorted expression and sincerely shed tears of sympathy for it. Chow Mu tossed away that blue snakelet. The little snake whimpered and wriggled its body, trying to escape. Arba stepped on its tail. Everyone, "Little fellow, you're too much." Arba put the 2 venomous fangs into a small crystal bottle. After putting away the bottle, he squatted down and lifted the snake up. The snake was helpless. Its head tilted up slightly, and its eyes were filled with pitiful tears. It's crying!" Fairy Ginkgo exclaimed as if she had discovered a new continent. How could it not cry? Everyone looked at the cowardly little blue snake with great sympathy. "What are you crying for?" The little fellow slapped the snake's head and pried open its mouth again, sprinkling 2 drops of medicinal liquid into it. "It'll grow back in a month." "What a stupid snake, crying. Your 2 venomous fangs aren't growing well. Otherwise, how could they be pulled out so easily? Now that I've removed them before they're completely crooked, the ones that grow back in the future will be much sturdier than this. Pig." Arbor scolded the little snake to himself and threw it into the soil. Scram! The little blue snake, who had its fangs pulled out and was scolded as a pig, felt that it had never felt so wronged in its life. So wronged! It wriggled its slender little tail and was about to hurriedly burrow back into the soil when it suddenly saw Arbor take out a bottle of medicinal liquid from his sleeve and feed it to the big white snake on his wrist. What a sweet smell! The little blue snake paused and suddenly slithered towards Chow Moo's feet with a rustle. Everyone thought, "You're courting death." The little blue snake slithered to Arbor's feet and suddenly collapsed on the ground in a very human-like manner. Then, its belly flipped, and it actually rolled towards the sky like a fish. It stuck out its belly and had a "please feed me" expression on its face. Everyone was speechless. Arbor glanced at it and said expressionlessly, "You can eat it if you want. In the future, I will offer a drop of venom essence every 3 months." The corner of Ma Shurchen's mouth twitched as she stole a glance at Emolien, who was standing beside her. He dared to bet his head with Emolien that the little fellow was definitely doing this on purpose. This little blue snake was definitely not an ordinary creature. Unfortunately, he was caught by Chow Chow today, even though he had been living in this poison valley for so many years. This is a blue spirit snake emperor. Arbor picked up the little blue snake, who was willing to sell himself because of his gluttony, and expressionlessly threw him back to the 100 Poison Valley on Paradise Planet. Although it is only a little snake at the peak of spiritual beast level, its venom is the most poisonous in the world. A drop of poison essence every 3 months was more than enough for her. The blue spirit snake emperor's venom was very malleable and could be made into all kinds of poisons. In the future, this venom would be very effective against great spiritual masters above level 10. Arbor turned around and looked at everyone. "What's with your expressions?" "And nothing." Fairy Ginkgo mumbled and closed her mouth. She secretly thought that the little blue snake was a little pitiful. Chapter 2175. Look, even after selling herself, she's still happily counting money for her master. Arbor glanced at them. Although no one said anything, their eyes were full of drama. Miss Chow turned her head and continued walking forward. Everyone followed the thin and long path filled with thick fog. After walking for about half an hour, they saw a bright light in front of them. A row of bamboo houses was hidden in the fog. Looking at it, it was as if they were in a fairyland, the fog lingering around. Arbor blinked and looked up at Emolien. "Don't you feel that the way in has been very smooth?" Emolien nodded. "It's fine. Since the other party opened the door and let us in, let's see how capable this Madame Feng is." Arbor was naturally not afraid. Since Madame Feng dared to capture Dunzong, she had to be prepared to be uprooted. Moreover, she was also somewhat curious about Madame Feng's background. What kind of status did she have in the Tian Yun organization? Hall Master? Or even higher? Arbor glanced over indifferently. He took out 2 small medicine bottles from his inner world and handed them to the Ginkgo Fairy and the Peony Fairy. "Apply this on your exposed skin. I guarantee that no poisonous insects will dare to approach you." Weren't they tired of keeping the defensive barrier open all day long? Keeping the barrier open also consumed spiritual energy. Oh no, they were consuming sacred energy, okay. The 2 hurriedly took the medicine and removed the barrier after applying it. They looked around and saw that no poisonous creatures dared to approach them. Only then did they relax. Everyone walked towards the entrance of the bamboo house. At the same time, Dun Zong, who was tied to an interrogation pillar, was cursing at Madame Feng. "Stop dreaming. A warrior prefers death to humiliation. I won't tell you who I am even if I die." It was really like a tiger being bullied by dogs. To think that he, a dignified venerable realm cultivator, was forced to be suppressed in Gung Pengcheng's small spirit realm body. Woo woo woo. He wanted to regain his previous cultivation and had to continue cultivating. The problem was that he needed time to train. Although he was already training as hard as he could, Gung Pengcheng's body was limited. The more he thought about it, the more pitiful he felt. He wanted to cry. Madame Feng's face darkened as she stood in front of Dun Zhu. Seeing that he was about to cry again, she couldn't help but raise her hand and slap his face. "Shut up. You fierce woman. Bring me a whip. Wow. Don't hit me, don't hit me. Ah." The moment the whip came down, the stalks let out a heart-wrenching cry and a heart-rending scream. "Shut up." Madame Feng scolded angrily. Her face was slightly distorted. At this moment, the door of Nethery's room was pushed open. A woman who looked like a maid hurried over with her head lowered. She whispered to Madame Feng, "Madam, Hall Master Gong is here." Madame Feng frowned slightly. She handed the whip in her hand to the maidservant and said, "Continue." "Yes." She turned around and walked out. Miserable screams rose again. As the door of Nethery's room slammed shut, Madame Feng raised her hand and rubbed the space between her eyebrows. Everything had been going wrong recently. After her stubborn disciple, Huang He, discovered her biggest secret, she wanted to get rid of Huang He but failed. What happened next was even more dramatic. She actually discovered that her husband seemed to have been replaced by someone else. This Gung Pengcheng in front of her was completely different from her husband in terms of temperament and behavior. Chapter 2176. Although he usually covered it up very well and could clearly describe many of the past events between them, he naturally couldn't match the small details. 2 days ago, Madame Feng was completely certain that the Gung Pengcheng in front of her had definitely been swapped. However, that person's skills were very good. The appearance did not change, but the heart was different. In other words, the original Gung Pengcheng's soul had probably dissipated long ago, and his spiritual consciousness had been destroyed. Although this man had never loved her from the beginning to the end, they had been husband and wife for so many years. It would be a lie to say that she did not regret it. If it were not for Gung Pengcheng, she would not have joined the organization and undergone such a drastic change. From a cripple in the past, she had become a person with special abilities. Her life had completely changed. Although Gung Pengcheng usually treated her with respect, as a husband, he had performed quite well. When they were outside, he gave her enough face as his wife. In the manner, he also never allowed those concubines to suppress her. After decades of being together, he left just like that. It would be a lie to say that she did not regret it. After old Gung left, Madame Feng felt as if a knife had been twisted in her heart for the past few days. It turned out that there were many things that she did not know when she was together. Only when she lost him would she know that the other party was not that unimportant to her. It did not matter that her husband did not love her. At least he was still with her. But now, there was nothing left. Madame Feng clenched her fists tightly and quickly walked into the hall. The hall was very dark and secluded. On the 4 walls, there were wooden decorations such as ox-headed and horse-faced malicious ghosts hanging. Each of them was described as terrifying. A tall and slightly thin young man was standing in the hall with his back facing her. He slowly turned his head. His face was covered with a ghost mask, and his scarlet ghost eyes were staring at her. Madame Feng's heart skipped a beat. She quickly bowed and respectfully called out, "Hall Master Gong." A low and hoarse roar came from behind Hall Master Gong. A figure suddenly appeared beside her like lightning and reached out to grab her neck. Madame Feng was shocked. She only felt that the hand that grabbed her seemed to be very strong. She forced herself to raise her neck and look at the person who came. She saw a woman with a slightly ashen face and veins on her face. She was bared her teeth and glared at her fiercely. That face was not the face of a normal human. The woman's hair had been shaved clean, and her bald head was covered with ferocious veins. A left hand was gripping her neck, and the strength was so great that she couldn't move at all. "Chief Gong," Madame Fong said with difficulty. "Ali," the man called out faintly. The bald woman named Li suddenly threw Madame Fong away. Madame Fong was sent flying back more than a meter before falling heavily to the ground. She lay on the ground and gasped for air. Hiding the fear in her eyes, she raised her head with difficulty and glanced at Hall Master Gong. She quickly lowered her head and said respectfully, "Hall Master, please spare my life. Hall Master, please spare my life." "Fong Lon." Hall Master Gong looked at her coldly and said, "Do you know where you went wrong?" Madame Fong lowered her head and didn't even dare to breathe loudly. "You've greatly disappointed the Lord," Hall Master Gong sneered. "Your impatience has ruined the Lord's plans. Now that those people have found their way here, what are you going to do?" A cold and bloody smile appeared on Fong Lan's face. Chapter 2177. Kill them and make sure they don't return. "With just you." Humiliation flashed through Fong Lan's eyes. She raised her head and said with a twisted expression, "Of course, it's not just me. There are also the 100,000 mystic cultivators under my command." "Your subordinates?" Yes, Master's subordinates. Master didn't have you nurture these people for you to squander as you wish." Fong Lon silently lowered her head. Everyone thought that Gung Pengcheng had a very powerful private army under his command, but they didn't know that this private army was actually collected and nurtured by her master. They directly obeyed her master, but she had the authority to mobilize them. But Hall Master Gong said she couldn't abuse this authority to mobilize troops. Fong Lon was naturally unconvinced. If she didn't mobilize these troops, how could she deal with those people from Arbor? How could she avenge her husband? At this moment, she didn't know that Gung Pengcheng's original body had died in Arbor's hands. She only vaguely felt that this matter probably had something to do with that stoic-faced little girl. But now, Hall Master Gong actually issued such an order? "Fong Lon, it's best if you don't act on your own," Hall Master Gong said to her coldly. "Hand over the transfer order for the Shun Tian guards." Madame Nei Fong silently clenched her fists. Unexpectedly, she heard an inhuman roar coming from behind Hall Master Gong. Madame Nei Feng's heart tightened. She looked up at the bald woman standing a few steps behind Hall Master Gong, her palms sweating. This woman's strange appearance made her wonder who she was. Madame Nei Fong broke out in cold sweat and thought, "She doesn't look human, but her appearance is infinitely close to a human's. Could it be? Could it be?" Madame Nei Feng's eyes almost completely lit up. "Hall Master, could it be? It's a perfect zombie." Hall Master Gong sneered coldly. "Do you think her appearance is perfect? This was far from a perfect zombie, okay? Her evolution failed. She's now a rank 1 special grade zombie." Hall Master Gong swept a glance at the bald woman and said coldly, "She can't even advance to rank 2. Such good resources spent on her have been wasted." The bald woman lowered her head in defeat. This expression? This greatly surprised Madame Fong. She hurriedly said, "Hall Master, has she completely awakened her spiritual intelligence?" "Of course," Hall Master Gong said coldly. This rank 1 special zombie puppet possessed the memories of its human predecessor. Not only had she fully awakened her intelligence, she was basically no different from a human. However, Hall Master Gong frowned as he looked at the bald woman's appearance. He shook his head and said, "A failed product is ultimately a failed product." If he advanced to the second stage, the veins on his skin should recede, and his appearance would be no different from that of an ordinary person. But now, the bald woman would definitely give people the impression that she was not one of them at first glance. Unfortunately, he was only one small step away. Hall Master Gong sighed and gestured for the bald woman to take a few steps back. He walked over to Madame Fong, raised his hand, and said coldly, "Hand it over." The transfer order of the Shantion Sentinels was a private army that she had painstakingly cultivated for so many years. Madame Fong gritted her teeth and took out a transfer order from her inner world with trembling hands. She bowed and handed it to Hall Master Gong. "Hall Master," Madame Fong called out submissively, "I will bring these people away." Hall Master Gong swept a glance at Madame Fong. Chapter 2178. I'll give you one last piece of advice. There are some enmity that you can't avenge. You can still survive if you leave as soon as possible. Now isn't the best time to clash head-on with Arber's group. His lord has ordered not to clash head-on with them. Why? Fong Lon raised her head and questioned loudly. She could sense that Hall Master Gong's aura had also sunk slightly, as if he was very unhappy. Fong Lon, pay attention to your status. Weigh clearly what you should and shouldn't ask. Hall Master Gong coldly glanced at her and turned to leave with a flick of his sleeve. Suddenly, a female attendant hurriedly ran in and hastily saluted Hall Master Gong and Fong Lon. "Madam, it's bad. That Miss Chow has led a group of people into our valley. Now that they've entered the bamboo hut and discovered that there was no one there, they're looting our supplies." Fong Lon clenched her fists and glared at Hall Master Gong, who was watching coldly from the sidelines. "Hall Master, that girl is so arrogant and despotic. Why do we have to tolerate her so much? This is an order from above. Just do as you're told." Hall Master Gong turned around and walked 3 steps before coldly glancing at the bald woman beside him. "Ali, why aren't you leaving?" That bald woman called Ali was like a mechanical puppet. She desperately wanted to turn around and leave with the Hall Master, but her body seemed to be out of her control and didn't move at all. Hall Master Gong sneered, "A defective product is a defective product. You can't control your body again? Take her away." The 2 subordinates following behind him immediately walked forward and lifted Ali from both sides. They directly carried her away as if she was a clay sculpture. This was completely the posture of moving goods. The bald woman was already sane, so this posture caused a great sense of shame to rise in her heart. "Hall Master Gong." Fong Lon couldn't resist raising her voice and called out to the Hall Master wearing a ghost mask. "Don't tell me we're abandoning this base? What else?" Hall Master Gong coldly glanced at Fong Lon. "If you didn't act rashly and alert the enemy in your eagerness for instant success and startle that girl, would we have completely retreated now?" Fong Lon couldn't resist grinding her teeth. "I don't understand. With his lord's power, couldn't he just kill that little stoic? She's just a little girl from the lower star region. Could it be that Arber has some unknown identity?" Hall Master Gong coldly glanced at Fong Lon. "Don't act on your own. I'm warning you for the last time, no." "Yes, of course." "How pretentious." "Lord Zhang," Hall Master Gong said coldly. When Hall Master Gong finished speaking and turned around, he suddenly heard a violent roar from the side. His expression changed and he turned his head away. Suddenly, the bald woman seemed to have gone mad. She actually dashed towards the female attendant. "Ah!" The female attendant let out a cry of alarm. She was suddenly knocked backwards by her and fell to the ground with a bang. Hall Master Gong angrily shouted, "Ali!" However, the bald woman didn't listen to his command at all. She roared and ran outside. Fong Lon was startled for a moment, then her face lit up with joy. This special-grade corpse puppet had already developed intelligence, and it even had the memories of a human when it was alive. She went crazy when she heard Arber's name, so it looked like she definitely had an irreconcilable grudge with this little stoic. Roar, roar, roar. The bald female corpse puppet called Ali grimaced in pain and dashed out madly without a care. It was too late for Hall Master Gong to send people to intercept her. Chapter 2179. Damn it! Hall Master Gong shouts angrily and turns his head to look at the 2 subordinates who were carrying the bald woman. "Are you all dead? Why aren't you going to stop her? The two subordinates complain incessantly in their hearts. This rank 1 special class zombie has boundless strength and incomparably fast speed. It really isn't something that two little spirit masters can deal with. They don't know what's wrong with this fellow. It suddenly goes crazy and makes people unable to guard against it. Although they are constantly cursing in their hearts, the two of them don't dare to say anything. Since it's the Hall Master's order, they quickly follow and prepare to stop the bald woman. However, when they rush out, they can't find any trace of the bald woman. That bald woman's speed is much faster than theirs. In the time it takes to say a few words, she has already flown off to God knows where. Meanwhile, Chow Mu and the others had ransacked that row of bamboo houses from top to bottom, inside and out. With the mentality of not wasting anything that can be used, everyone puts everything they see into their inner worlds. The Peony Fairy even says in a deadpan manner, "I didn't expect that our trip to this small valley would actually have some gains. This is really unexpected. There are a lot of spirit stones piled up in this bamboo house. He Chen and the others don't need them, so Aber takes them all." In the end, looking at some sturdy wooden tables and chairs in the bamboo house, Aber thinks that when there are more people in the future, he will build his own small house on Paradise Planet. His family will also need these things, so he puts them all in one go. Everyone looks at her as if they are looking at a god. Wherever this little fellow passed by, not a single strand of hair was left behind. After sweeping through this row of bamboo houses, everyone has some gains. For example, Ginkgo Fairy and the others took a batch of pretty good medicinal pills. Aber doesn't really need these medicinal pills and the like. If she wants them, she can just refine them herself. Another example is that some of the spirit tools stored in the bamboo house were taken away by Dao Wuji. This brat plans to listen to little sister-in-law's words. In the future, when he fights, he won't waste his strength if he can get spirit tools to explode. When everyone comes out of the bamboo house, they all have a lot of gains. Just as they are about to continue walking inside, they suddenly hear a low and hoarse roar. Roar, roar, roar. Chow Mu abruptly turned her head, and the first thing she saw was a large bald head with countless veins protruding from it. So ugly. Chow Mu creased her brows and decisively swept her palm across. The wood spiritual energy that he pushed out endlessly pressed forward and heavily struck the bald woman's face that was pouncing towards him. Pang! The bald woman dodged as fast as lightning. Aber's attack missed and smashed into the ground behind the bald woman. The broken gravel immediately splashed out, and some dust flew in front of their eyes. Everyone subconsciously narrowed their eyes. Roar! Roar! The bald woman stared straight at Aber. Her purplish-red lips wriggled, and she shouted hoarsely and strenuously, "Joe! Would..." Her voice was very strange. It sounded like a human, but it wasn't. It took her a lot of effort to say the two simple words, Aber. Aber looked at her coldly and sized her up. He frowned and said, "Corpse puppet? What?" Dao Wuji looked over in shock. When he saw her just now, he thought that this bald woman was just a little ugly. He didn't expect that Jojo would call her a corpse puppet. Broken dreams. Chapter 2180. Emolien also furrowed her brows. It did appear to be a zombie, and it was a zombie in a complete human form. Her appearance was not good-looking, and her expression was slightly stiff. But compared to those crooked and rotting zombies in the past, this one was clearly very outstanding. However, why did this human-shaped zombie suddenly dash out from behind the bamboo house and attack Jojo without any explanation? She seemed to know Jojo and even called out her name. But it was clear that the husband and wife did not know who this bald woman was. The Peony Fairy blocked the attack and turned back to shout, "Hey, Jojo, this zombie seems to be coming for you." Aber nodded. She could naturally tell that this human-shaped zombie had clearly called out her name just now. Moreover, the hatred in this bald woman's eyes was very bone-piercing. The bald woman hated her? But she had no recollection of it at all. She did not even know when she had interacted with this bald woman. Roar, roar. The bald woman clenched her fists tightly. Her finger bones appeared very thick, and her hands were 2 to 3 times larger than normal women's hands. Upon closer inspection, one would discover that her hands were covered in a thick layer of calluses that were many times thicker than other people's hands. Although her body no longer rotted after the mutation, she was still so ugly. "Jojo! Moo!" The bald woman shouted menacingly and abruptly dashed toward Arbor. She swung out her arms, which abruptly turned into slender noodles, and slapped at Arbor's head. Seeing this, Emolien promptly threw out a purple flame and hugged Arbor to the side. "Wife, don't be scared, don't be scared." Emolien calmly rubbed the little fellow's chest. "Hubby is here." Arbor? ? Jojo was not scared at all, okay? Hubby was taking advantage of her, right? "Ciao. Moo." The bald woman's resentful voice rang out again, and her scarlet eyes stared fixedly at Arbor and Emolien. Kill. You." The bald woman spat out these 3 words with great effort. Her 2 long arms swung in the air and attacked in the direction of Arbor again. Squawk. The bald woman let out an extremely unpleasant roar, and 2 short black wings suddenly sprouted from her back. Squawk, squawk. The bald woman flew into the air and looked down at the ground fiercely. She flapped her short wings and swooped down from a height of 100 meters. She looked like she was going to throw Arbor to the ground and tear it apart. "I wonder what level this corpse puppet is," the peony fairy said with a strange expression. "It seems that it has evolved to a certain extent. Compared to the little monsters we saw before, this zombie can fly and mutate parts of its body. She doesn't seem like a high-level zombie." While everyone was discussing, the purple flames in Emolien's hands had already built a high defensive wall of fire in front of the 2 of them. When the bald woman swooped down, she crashed into the flames. Immediately, she screamed in pain and subconsciously retreated. "Kill them. Don't leave a single one alive." Madame Nay Fong rushed forward with several hundred personal guards and bellowed while pointing at Arbor and the others. Several hundred spiritual cultivators rushed forward, but before they could get close to Arbor and Emolien, they were stopped by little Tai Sui and the others. Chapter 2181. What? You want to win with numbers? Dao Wuji chuckled and summoned his large saber from his consciousness. He slung it over his shoulder. "Come. Grandpa will play with you." A spirit master around 40 years old coldly glanced at Dao Wuji. He stomped on the ground and shot toward Dao Wuji. Originally, Xiao Chen thought that he would be able to send Dao Wuji flying with this punch. But unexpectedly, he was bounced back in the same way he had charged over. His speed was twice as fast as before. His entire body tumbled as he was struck by Dao Wuji's punch. His mouth and nose were bleeding, and he howled as he was sent flying. Hundreds of spirit masters' expressions darkened. They looked at Dao Wuji as if they were facing a great enemy. They knew that brother's cultivation very well. He was a rank 7 spirit master, but he couldn't even last 1 move against this pretty boy. "Go." A spirit master clenched his teeth. He waved his hand and everyone rushed forward to attack little Tai Sui and the others. A few of them even looked around and set their sights on Arbor, who was idly watching from the side. Arbor was standing behind Emolien's defensive wall of fire. He coldly watched the bald woman swoop back and forth in the air, trying to break through Emolien's defensive wall of fire. Unexpectedly, the sound of wind whistling could be heard in his ears. Emolien didn't even turn her head. Several black lotus seals flew out with a flick of her finger. She didn't even look at them and directly shot toward the sneak attackers. As soon as the black lotus seal came into contact with the skin of the sneak attackers, it immediately burst open, and a thick layer of black fog instantly swallowed the attackers. Faint cries of struggle came from the depths of the black fog. In the blink of an eye, those people had already transformed into ashes and completely vanished into thin air. The group of spirit masters who turned around to look at them couldn't help but shudder violently when they saw this. Their eyes were slightly frightened as they looked at the ruthless young man. These people looked so young. Unexpectedly, their cultivations were much higher than theirs. At this moment, these spirit masters couldn't help but feel some regret in their hearts. If Madame Feng had not promised them great benefits, how could they have disobeyed Hall Master Gong's orders and recklessly followed Madame Feng's orders? At the same time, the man wearing the devil mask was coldly looking at a maid who was kneeling on the ground and trembling slightly. "You said that Madame Feng led more than 500 people over?" The maid nodded vigorously. "Hall Master, Madam didn't do it on purpose." "Not on purpose?" Hall Master Gong sneered. "She went against her master's orders and made a decision on her own. I think she must have been used to living like a princess for so many years that she forgot her true identity. She was just a dog that the master had taken in. She was so disobedient and even wanted to betray the master. This ambitious woman, as the master had said, could not be kept." "Hall Master, what about Ali? Although our people have rushed over, Ali's strength and speed are extraordinary. We may not be able to suppress her." Hall Master Gong coldly looked outside the hall. He could occasionally hear the sounds of fighting and killing coming from outside. "Let's go." The subordinate's expression suddenly froze. "Let's go." Could it be that Hall Master Gong wanted to give up on the special class corpse puppet? However, it wasn't just a matter of time for a special class corpse puppet to take shape. Chapter 2182. This still required the investment of a large amount of manpower and resources. How could he give up on such a meticulous nurturing just like that? Hall Master Gong was truly generous. "It's just a disobedient pet," Hall Master Gong said coldly and waved his hand. "In any case, it's just trash. It doesn't matter." "Since that's the case, Hall Master, should we evacuate the Shuntian guards now?" Hall Master Gong nodded. "Go ahead. You take them away first." "I'll..." "Hall Master, it's bad, it's bad." When Hall Master Gong heard the voice, his brows involuntarily creased. He looked up coldly at the slightly plump middle-aged man who barged in. "Wu Meng, how many times have I told you? Don't be so alarmed when something happens." Sorry, Hall Master." The plump middle-aged man swayed his body and giggled foolishly. "What happened?" Hall Master Gong asked coldly. Hall Master." The corpse poison in the Shuntian guards suddenly flared up and bit everyone they saw. Now, the number of people affected has spread to more than 10,000. Although the fat man had a silly look on his face, his words were like beans pouring out of a bamboo tube. He spoke very quickly and in a very organized manner. Therefore, Hall Master Gong's face turned green when he heard this person's report. "Feng Lan, you're indeed gutsy, feigning compliance on the surface but opposing on the inside." Hall Master Gong gnashed his teeth and sneered. He raised his hand and said angrily, "What are you still standing there for? Quickly evacuate the unharmed members of the Shuntian guards." "Hall Master, this matter is still rather difficult," Wu Meng hurriedly said. Wu Meng hurriedly said, "Although our people went over to control it, the corpse poison acted up very quickly. Once bitten, the person will immediately turn into a corpse within a quarter of an hour." Hall Master Gong clenched his fists tightly. "It should be the corpse poison of the special grade zombie we left behind. They were originally only used for small-scale experiments, but they didn't expect the deranged Feng Lan to throw them into the Shuntian guards. Could it be that the Shuntian guards, which had 100,000 mystic cultivators and 1,000 spiritual cultivators, would be completely assimilated into a chaotic zombie army? That damned Feng Lan. She didn't hesitate to do this for her own selfish desires. It was him who underestimated a woman's hatred. Branch Master Gong tightened the obsidian bracelet on his wrist and subconsciously moved the round black stone. "Damn it! Hall Master? Should we go out and take a look?" Hall Master Gong shook his head. "If we go and see Feng Lan now, she will only be more pleased with herself. Quickly bring some people over and bring out those Shuntian guards who have not yet been infected." "Hall Master, what if we make a mistake and bring out those infected with corpse poison and mix them into the normal group? What should we do then?" Hall Master Gong's head was about to explode. At this moment, he felt like his head was about to explode. When he heard his subordinates say such words, he couldn't help but be angry. Then open your eyes and take a good look before you speak. After he finished speaking, he waved his hand and asked them to scram. He walked back and forth in the hall a few times before he reached out and took out a communication jade talisman from his inner world. He reported everything that had happened here, including Feng Lan's disloyalty and corpse puppet Ali's disobedience to his command to his master. Soon, the other party replied with a line of words, "Abandon all of them." This meant that he didn't want the mutated Shuntian guards either. Branch Master Gong glanced at the transfer order for the Shuntian guards in his hand and couldn't help but sneer. Bang! He smashed the transfer order into pieces. Chapter 2183. As though he still couldn't vent his anger, Hall Master Gong ruthlessly stomped on the shard again. Feng Lan thought she had won, but she would soon realize that she had utterly lost. The little stoic wasn't that easy to deal with. Naive. Besides, Master wouldn't let this matter pass so easily. Only death awaited Feng Lan. At this time, outside the bamboo building, the battle between Arbor's group and the bald woman and Feng Lan's group was nearing its end. From beginning to end, the bald woman hadn't been able to take a single step past the lightning bolt. She could only glare furiously and madly at Arbor through the defensive firewall as she cursed. However, her curses seemed to be stuck in her throat, making it completely indiscernible. It was extremely strenuous for her to even pronounce the two words, Arbor, let alone curse normally. Arbor expressionlessly glanced at this person. He only felt that the veins on that woman's bald head were bulging one by one. As far as the eye could see, they looked like earthworms twisting crookedly on her head, making him instinctively feel extremely disgusted. Ah, roar, ah! The bald woman roared at the sky in extreme grief and indignation. She pounced down again and again, crashing into Mo Lien's defensive fire barrier. As a result, she was flung back again and again. She was covered in cuts and bruises, but she still couldn't break through the defensive wall. Her furious gaze landed on Mo Lien, and she roared at Mo Lien for a while. Mo Lien simply didn't know what this person was roaring about. He only lowered his head to check on his wife's body. "Are you frightened? My Jojo, don't look at such an ugly thing. It stings your eyes." Arbor patted his chest. "I'm not scared at all. At least, her appearance isn't much different from a normal person's. It's better than those zombies that shed rotten flesh as they run, right? F*CK, the zombies that shed rotten flesh as they run are here." Dao Wuji's ghostly wails and howls came from the other end. Arbor's mouth twitched as he turned around to take a look. His eyeballs nearly popped out. Was this really true? All of a sudden, the back of the row of bamboo houses began to swarm. One after another, graceful zombies emerged from the back of the bamboo houses and lunged at little Tai Sui and the others. "Jojo bro jinxed it. Oh my, you scared this little sister to death." Fairy Ginkgo stretched out 2 fingers and gently patted her chest. In the blink of an eye, she savagely beat the few corpse puppets that had pounced over into pieces and rolled on the ground. Peony's movements were even more swift. She directly smashed down several lightning bolts, turning several corpses that were squeezed together into a pile of charred bones. Ma Shurchen laughed and said, "It's over, the entire mountain is covered with corpse puppets. Where did so many zombies come from?" Little Tai Sui also furrowed his brows. 100,000 Shuntian guards. No way. Endless Blade immediately cried out exaggeratedly, "Talent. Could it be that they turned the 100,000 Shuntian guards into corpse puppets because they wanted to deal with us? Oh wait, the Feng family is here, and a swarm of corpse puppets has appeared among the Shuntian guards. Could it be that these Shuntian guards aren't Gung Pengcheng's private army, but rather a team assembled by the Feng family?" Everyone looked at Endless Blade with measuring eyes. Heavens, Endless Blade could actually come up with such an analysis. This was the first time this had ever happened. Everyone revealed expressions of admiration and looked Endless Blade up and down again. Arbor also glanced at Endless Blade, giving him a look that said, "This child is worth teaching." This brother's IQ is finally online. Chapter 2184. Yuan Shichen was not stingy with her praise. It's rare to see you so smart. You must have paid a lot of attention to improving your brain recently. It's good to improve your brain. Little Tai Sui chimed in. Since it's so effective, remember to improve your brain often in the future. Don't make it worse. F*CKU. Dao Wuji glared at Yuan Shichen in annoyance, then glared at little Tai Sui. It's rare for me to be wise, but there are so many people who can't stand to see me doing well and are mocking me. What the hell is going on? Dao Wuji rolled his eyes and glared back at them one by one. I'll take out a small notebook later and write them down one by one. In the future. Humph, I'll mock them back. Everyone looked at the endless stream of zombies and charged forward with their sabers. This time, they had to be serious. Feng Lan looked on coldly for a while. Seeing that the bald woman who had been hovering in the air was unable to break through Prince Mo's defense line, she couldn't help but frown. This young couple was really detestable. Feng Lan waved her hand, and 4 or 5 maids immediately came over with a cart of spiritual energy balls. They put 3 or 4 spiritual energy balls into something that looked like a small catapult and aimed it in the direction of Emolien and Arbor. A chilly glint leaked out of Feng Lan's eyes. Qiao Mu, was it you people who harmed my husband and stole his soul? With a flick of Qiao Mu's finger, several hundred defensive talismans made from ebony flew out. They circled around Emolien's defensive firewall and tightly encircled the firewall, adding 2 layers of protection. Feng Lan questioned sternly, "What? You dare to do it but don't dare to admit it? Why wouldn't I dare to admit it?" Arbor sneered. "You reap what you sow. Gung Pengcheng sent people to trick me and assassinate me many times. Why can't I retaliate? Am I a pitiful little girl who can be beaten and scolded? Is it my fault that I resisted?" Feng Lan stared at her with a pale face and anxiously cursed. "Old Gung has never met you before. Why did he?" Halfway through her words, Feng Lan paused as a faint light of understanding flashed in her eyes. "What's your relationship with Long Chuyun? Are you?" Arbor's expression changed. Just as he was about to fly out of the defensive layer, Emolien suddenly reached out and hugged him tightly. "Don't be fooled. This woman is trying to lure you over." Emolien looked at Feng Lan indifferently, a trace of coldness flashing in her eyes. "It doesn't matter if you don't say it. We can probably guess it. Although the Shuntian Prefecture's prefecture lord married you, he probably never had you in his heart." "You're talking nonsense." Feng Lan's face instantly twisted. Emolien was actually just bluffing her a little, but who would have thought that Feng Lan would be duped by him at once? Hence, he had a better grasp of the situation. He looked at Madame Nei Feng with a sneer and said, "Your husband has someone else in his heart. That person should be a member of the Mu clan, right?" Feng Lan's pupils almost shrank. What kind of emotion could make a person willingly self-detonate their spiritual conscience in order to keep the secret with them? Emolien smiled faintly as he sized up the pale-faced Feng Lan. "I can understand Prefecture Lord Gung's actions very well. In this world, only true love can make a man willingly go to such lengths." Chapter 2185. Arbor blinked and looked up at her husband. "Is that so?" She turned her head and glanced at Feng Lan, whose face had turned green and white. She suddenly felt that the Crown Prince seemed to have guessed correctly. Looking at Feng Lan's extremely pale complexion, she probably knew that her husband had someone else in his heart. "You should only be guessing. Why does Manor Lord Gung want to deal with my Jojo?" Emolien continued faintly, "You probably know a little, but I'm afraid you don't know the specifics of what he's done. Based on your relationship as husband and wife, Manor Lord Gung shouldn't have told you about the missions he took on outside of Sky Fate, right? The person Gung Pengcheng wants to protect at all costs. Your love rival, that Mu family member, although she didn't do anything, she easily stole your husband's heart. Your life is truly pitiful, always living under the shadow of another person. You're in pain, you're struggling, and you're tormented, but to Manor Lord Gung, you're as insignificant as a speck of dust. You won't attract any of his attention. You've fallen deeply in love with your husband for decades, but unfortunately, the person you love is willing to sacrifice everything for another woman, even to the point of self-detonating his spiritual sense. When Lien's venomous tongue flared up, not to mention a mentally wounded woman, even someone with a strong psychological resistance wouldn't be able to withstand it. Shut up! Feng Lon screamed agitatedly. Arbor opened her small mouth and looked up at her husband with adoration. Heavens! Her husband had actually guessed correctly. Lien lowered his head to look at the little fellow, and he tapped her small head lightly with a finger in amusement. Jojo was good at everything, but she was always a bit muddle-headed when it came to matters of the heart. If you want her to guess why Gung Pengcheng self-detonated, she might as well kill Gung Pengcheng directly. With her EQ, it was impossible for her to understand why Gung Pengcheng would go to such lengths for a woman. Oh, maybe she wouldn't even be able to guess that the person Gung Pengcheng wanted to protect was a woman. Why should I shut up? Lien continued to provoke the woman. You pitiful and sad woman. Have you ever thought that the man you're risking everything to take revenge for has never cared about you in his entire life? You're really wishful thinking. Hu Shechen was speechless. This guy's mouth was really poisonous. Even a man like him couldn't stand it, let alone this crazy woman in front of him. Feng Lan's mind was filled with the thought that he had self-detonated. He had self-detonated. His spiritual sense had self-detonated. He had detonated his spiritual sense for that woman. He wasn't killed by someone else, but by his own self-detonation. He blew himself up. Although the young man in front of him had a vicious mouth, there was one thing he was right about. She had taken over Gung Pengcheng's position and worked hard to take revenge. However, in Gung Pengcheng's heart, he probably didn't care whether she would take revenge for him or not. But even if he told her this, even if that was the case, she still couldn't control her final feelings. She was like a burning devil's snare, poisonous but beautiful. Perhaps only death would be her final destination. Shut up, I don't want to listen to you anymore. Shut up, shut up, shut up. Feng Lon let out a shrill shriek as her eyes turned red. Arbor looked at her crazy appearance and couldn't help but sigh softly. Chapter 2186. Lien coldly glanced at Feng Lon. Do you know why he blew himself up? Because your love rival, that woman's subordinate, wanted to betray her and say that woman's name. In the end, Gung Pengcheng hugged your love rival's subordinate and blew himself up, taking that subordinate with him to the afterlife. Look, how much he cherished your love rival. Ah! Feng Lan's eyes were bloodshot. Shi Huixin. Shi Huixin. I won't let you off, you B******, B******, B******. She screamed crazily. This scream came from the bottom of her heart. Shi Huixin. Arbor coldly said this stranger's name. In all these years, she had never heard of this name. This name, which Lien spent a lot of effort to trick out of Feng Lan's mouth, was Shi Huixin. Was she her mother's former enemy? Was she also her current enemy? Lien was holding his wife, so he naturally knew that the little fellow's emotions were fluctuating, and her breathing was fluctuating. Thus, he lowered his head and whispered in her ear, "Don't take it too seriously. Maybe Shi Huixin is an imaginary enemy that Feng Lon conjectured herself. This matter still needs to be investigated, so I'll have someone do it." Shut up. Shut up, shut up. Separated by a layer of defensive firewall and 2 layers of ebony defensive array, although Feng Lon couldn't clearly hear what the two were whispering about, she was already in a deranged state, and she screamed angrily out of humiliation, "All of you, shut up." Arbor coldly glanced at her and didn't say anything. Just as Lien said, whether everything was true or not still needed further investigation. She didn't want to listen to Feng Lan's one-sided story. Of course, if this woman, Shi Huixin, really had a problem, she wouldn't let her off. Jojo. Emolian reached out and stroked the hair on her temples, saying softly, "Don't worry, I'm here for everything." Aba nodded and turned to look at Feng Lan, who was in a deranged state. Feng Lan was greatly shocked. At this time, she was still unable to recover from the news that Gung Pengcheng had self-destructed because of that woman. She raised her hand crazily, and a few servants immediately pulled the mechanism of the catapult with a sullen face. After a few whooshing sounds, the entire catapult trembled slightly, and several balls of spiritual energy were launched out with a series of bangs. Like shooting stars, several spiritual energy balls landed on the defensive talisman matrix that Xiao Mu had set up with a thud. The defensive array glyphs were instantly smashed by the spiritual energy ball. The entire array glyphs were instantly turned into fine powder. Aba coldly glanced over, and his gaze fell on Madame Feng's face, who seemed to have gone mad. "I want all of you to die here today." Madame Feng screamed. Her body was like a willow leaf, trembling in the wind. "Aba, die." Madame Feng screamed and waved her hand heavily. Immediately, 4 or 5 spirit energy balls rushed towards the defensive array glyphs set up in Arbor under her command. Boom! The entire array glyphs were once again turned into nothingness in this violent tremor. At this point, the 2 layers of array glyphs set up by Arbor were completely destroyed by the spiritual energy balls. Xiao Mu creased her brows and swept an indifferent glance at Madame Nei Feng. This person wasn't a cultivator. She was just an ordinary woman who had coincidentally obtained the special ability of speed and strength. Originally, it was impossible for her to break Arbor's double array glyphs by herself. Chapter 2187. Arbor glanced at Madame Feng in displeasure. Just as she was about to throw out more defensive array glyphs, Emolian reached out and pressed down on her small hand. "Wait a moment," he said softly as he held her hand. 1 or 2 of these spiritual energy balls couldn't break Jojo's defensive array glyphs. But releasing several of them in a row with this kind of dispenser was very powerful. He didn't want Jojo's defensive array glyphs to be broken by that woman every time. Rather than letting his wife waste her energy, it was better for him to deal with this woman. He waved his hand, and clusters of gorgeous red flames jumped between his fingers like dancing fairies. Xiao Mu raised her head to look at him. She saw these clusters of small flames that resembled fairies slowly fusing together. Then, a purple flame sprang up from within and completely merged with the scarlet flame. Whoosh! That flame pounced at Feng Lan as fast as lightning. Feng Lan shouted loudly, "This kind of speed can't hurt me at all." Just as she finished speaking, Feng Lan felt as if she was hit by a huge force. Her entire body was instantly enveloped by heat. The red and purple flames completely wrapped around her limbs, giving off steaming hot flames. Feng Lan felt as if her bones were placed on top of a bonfire, and she couldn't move at all. Damn it, there was definitely something strange about the man in front of her. His fire spiritual energy was completely different from others. She was actually slapped in the face. This thought flashed through Feng Lan's mind with grief and indignation. Her special abilities of speed and strength were completely useless in front of those who were truly supreme in terms of strength. Feng Lan didn't know that Mo Lian's fire spiritual energy was mixed with medicinal power. Naturally, it was different from others. Roar, roar. The special grade zombie named Ali suddenly roared, and a small spatial whirlpool suddenly appeared in front of Mo Lian. This whirlpool disappeared as quickly as it appeared. When Arbor reached out to grab it, Prince Mo's figure actually quickly disappeared in that whirlpool. This female zombie actually grasped the special ability of teleportation? Arbor looked at her dear husband who was teleported away with a stunned expression. She was so angry that her head hurt. Her husband was taken away by a demon. This simply made her feel unwell. The little fellow didn't expect that this bald female zombie had actually comprehended a special ability. This was something she had never seen before. Her husband. Arbor waved out hundreds of butterflies and shouted in exasperation, "Go find that bald female zombie!" Whoosh, 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 whoosh. A group of butterflies immediately flapped their wings and flew in all directions. At the same time, Hall Master Gong's group, who had already retreated from the valley. Gong coldly glanced at the bottom of the cliff. "Hall Master, do you want to burn the entire valley below?" Wu Meng made a gesture of setting fire to the valley. Hall Master Gong glanced at him indifferently, and the fat man called Wu Meng immediately stopped talking. Because he knew when he needed to speak, and when he needed him to shut up. Just like now, Hall Master's meaning was very clear. He didn't want to make Arbor's group an enemy for the time being. Since that was the case, as a subordinate, it wasn't convenient for him to say anything. "How should we report to Master about Ali when we return?" Wu Meng couldn't help but ask. Hall Master Gong turned around and glanced at him indifferently. "What's there to report?" Chapter 2188. Wu Meng was slightly taken aback. Hall Master Gong glanced at him and said coldly, "I'll tell you the truth. Ali, this failed evolution product, doesn't have many days left to live." This was the first time Wu Meng had heard of this. He couldn't help but ask curiously, "Is what Hall Master said true?" Hall Master Gong nodded with a cold expression. Master has long since given up on this failed product. When this special class zombie was promoted to rank 2, she was given many precious medicines. Among them was a medicinal liquid specially used to promote special abilities. This special class zombie comprehended the special ability of spatial teleportation. Unfortunately, the teleportation range is limited to 100 feet, so it's practically useless. Her special ability was different from ordinary people's, which could be upgraded by absorbing the crystal cores in low-class zombies' brains. Her special ability was permanent. Her special ability would remain at whatever level it was supposed to be. She wouldn't be able to upgrade even half a step until she died. Therefore, although this person had become a special class zombie, it was useless. Her special ability level hadn't reached special class at all. Hall Master Gong silently looked up at the completely darkened sky. "Let's go. This valley couldn't be used anymore." The Shuntian sentinels were almost completely wiped out here. However, this didn't matter to Hall Master Gong. Since Master had given the order, then they should give up. Wu Meng turned back and looked deeply at the valley before following Hall Master Gong's footsteps. With the two of them leaving like this, it meant that they had completely given up on the Shuntian sentinels and special class zombies. Of course, to them, Feng Lan was an existence they could do without. However, they couldn't help but feel that it was a pity for the 100,000 elite soldiers that they had painstakingly nurtured. After the two of them left, the deep valley below was still covered by smoke. The poisonous insects and creatures in the valley seemed to have sensed something as they all crawled out of their nests and scrambled to climb up the cliff. For some reason, it felt like a storm was about to come. Feng Chen strode up to Qiao Mu and stared at her small face that was flushed red from anger. Suppressing the laughter in his heart, he coughed lightly and reassured, "Don't worry, that female zombie's ability is limited. This venerable one doesn't think they can move too far." "This Baldy caught my husband." Arbor was exasperated. She was really angry. That female monster had actually taken her husband away in front of her. How preposterous. Feng Chen coughed lightly when she heard this. "I don't think that spatial vortex is too big. I estimate that it's only about 100 feet in diameter. It won't exceed that by too much. Why don't we split up and look for it?" Arbor shook his head and looked at the black poison-tailed butterflies fluttering in the air. He said softly, "Let's go. We already have a direction." Feng Chen nodded and turned to give Dao Wuji and the others a look, telling them to continue to stay here and exterminate the corpse puppets that had lost their minds. He called little Tai Sui and followed Jojo and the poison-tailed butterfly to Emol Yen. The poison-tailed butterfly fluttered its wings and quickly led Arbor's group to a place. Walking into the valley from the valley, there was a small, gurgling stream. Both paths were filled with lush trees. Behind the layers of trees, there was an old wooden house hidden in the middle. Arbor pushed aside the branches and rushed over. In the end, she saw a scene that made her very angry. Chapter 2189. The bald demoness had found a red veil from somewhere and covered her head. She was determined to grab Emolyen's hand. Emolyen dodged her several times, but was strangely trapped in the 4 small vortexes. No matter where he dodged, there was always the possibility of being sucked in. Arbor! Exclamation point. On the other hand, Feng Chen couldn't resist laughing. My heavens! This zombie is disguised as a ghost. Does it want to marry Emolyen? Arbor quickly walked toward her husband. She originally wanted to avoid the spatial vortexes and fly to her husband's side, but the vortexes were very strange. Once a person got close, they would be sucked in by an endless suction force. Miss Chow was furious. She looked coldly at the bald female zombie with the red veil, who was desperately trying to pounce to her husband's side. She was courting death. Chow Mu's gaze harshly shot out a burst of water spiritual energy at the bald female zombie's back. The water spirit rippled into the air and instantly turned into millions of ice shards, which shot toward the bald female zombie's head. This sudden attack forced the female zombie to give up on pursuing Emolyen, and she could only turn around to deal with Chow Mu first. Arbor naturally wouldn't be polite with this monster. After the first wave of ice shards, the second wave came. Arbor had basically reached the point of perfection in the use of water and with spirit power. Thus, it was a piece of cake for her to consecutively unleash instantaneous attacks. Roar, roar, roar. After being smashed by 3 waves of ice rain, the special class zombie fell backward, dizzy and disoriented. With a wave of Chow Mu's small hand, rows of earth spikes burrowed out from under the special level zombie's feet and abruptly transformed into several hundred confinement vines, firmly binding this special level zombie's legs within the vines. Ah! Ah! This zombie could actually let out a very human-like scream. Arbor couldn't help but look at her a few more times. Compared to any of the corpse puppets in the past, the one in front of him clearly had a complete intelligence. She could even look at him with resentment in her eyes. However, a corpse puppet was still a corpse puppet. She was something that could be resurrected after death. Her value was very, very low. Roar! The special grade zombie lifted the red veil on its head and glared at Arbor in front of it. He seemed to be resentful that she had rushed over at such a critical juncture. Her wedding ceremony was ruined by this woman again. This vicious woman, it was her who had turned her into this state that was neither human nor ghost. It was her. He ordered her to be pushed down from the city gate tower to be fed to the zombies, making her suffer pain and torture before she died. Such a vicious woman was actually able to win Prince Mo's affections, and he actually treated her like the apple of his eye. On what basis? How was she inferior to this unruly, willful, arrogant, and unbridled woman in front of her? She, Wei Mingli, refused to accept this. Arbor's thought suddenly moved, and the startled swan dagger suddenly appeared and pierced through the special class zombie's left shoulder blade. As a corpse puppet, she naturally didn't feel any pain, but the startled swan dagger was no ordinary item. Therefore, after being pierced by the startled swan dagger, the bald female corpse puppet suddenly felt that her entire left arm couldn't move. It was unbearably stiff. After all, ever since she had advanced to become a special class zombie, her entire body was no different from a human's flexibility. But now, a trace of anger flashed across the bald female's face. Chapter 2190. D****. Finally, Chow Mu heard the bald female zombie's words clearly. As expected, this zombie already had emotions of its own and could even curse people. Arbor glanced at her curiously and then instinctively asked, "Do you have memories of when you were a human?" Roar! The female zombie roared angrily at Arbor. Her eyes flickered with a bone-deep hatred. Yes, she wanted nothing more than to kill Arbor right now. However, This woman's strength was several notches higher than before. It would be very difficult to kill her if she didn't succeed in one hit. Wei Mingli, Wei Mingli. The female zombie roared these words in a very strange voice. Xiao Mu expended a great deal of effort before realizing that the 3 words she said were, Wei something Li. Arba carefully sized her up again and shook his head. I don't know you. Fortunately, Wei Mingli couldn't be considered a human in essence. Thus, she didn't explode in anger at Arba, but her eyes were filled with a strange look. At the same time, Emolian finally broke free of the 4-layered space vortex set up by Wei Mingli with several lotus marks. She turned to look at Arba. He hurriedly flew to her side, but before he could say anything to his wife, Wei Mingli was already beside him. On the side, Wei Mingli seemed to have been bewitched, pouncing on Crown Prince Amo the moment she saw him. This hungry tiger pouncing on its prey was extremely large. Arba's eyelids twitched at the sight. Without thinking too much, he directly sent a flying kick towards Wei something Li. What are you doing? Not only did this whimsical female zombie want to secretly marry Emolian, but she also wanted to pounce on her husband right in front of her. She simply didn't know what death was. On the other side, Wei Mingli, who was blocked by Arba, was 100 times more furious and tormented than Arba. Especially when she saw Prince Amo walk over and naturally wrap his arm around the little girl's waist, Wei Mingli felt the world's malice toward her. His eyes were still so focused. Wei Mingli reflexively touched her vein-covered cheek. His face was truly frightening. Walking on the streets at night would probably scare people to death. In the past, when she was as beautiful as a flower, the Crown Prince didn't even spare her a glance, let alone now. But she couldn't accept it. Arba, that little bitch, she didn't even remember who she was. Since that was the case, a vicious glint flitted across Wei Mingli's eyes. Wei Mingli abruptly jumped to her feet and screamed, I'll let you completely remember who I am. Wei Mingli suddenly stretched out her hands and raised them toward the sky. Immediately, 7 or 8 spatial vortexes appeared around Arba. It wanted to suck her in. Scram! Arba couldn't help but get angry. This female corpse puppet actually wanted to transfer her out of here? He wanted to occupy her lotus with all his heart. Jojo. Emolian only felt her heart skip a beat, and she was about to pounce over. Suddenly, a person rushed out from the side and pressed down on Arba at an incomparably fast speed, forcefully flipping her to the ground. At the same time, Arba only felt that the figure pressing down on top of her seemed to be squeezed by spatial power and vibrated. With a pft, she spat out a mouthful of blood. That person's aura instantly turned from strong to weak, becoming dispirited. Arba narrowed her eyes at the woman pressing down on top of her, and her gaze couldn't help but become angry. Who told you to act on your own and save me? Sleep. You're tuning in to the Narrate and Escape YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.